the great thing that Furia did here was their map play was pretty good, but then additionally, the way they set up these team fights, the way they used this composition to isolate G2 members, or when a G2 member did come in, the ability to absolutely stuff them, that dragon fight was insane.
Yeah. And you know the icon start, Emily, we watched a lot of
We've watched a lot of bad icons.
a lot of bad icons. That one made me a little scared. A little bit. But they played it out so well. The fact that Tatu flashed out the Poppy ulti and then held his Q3, the knockup, just to be able to re-engage. They are so ready for any situation with a lead. I did not expect this level from Furia.
I mean, that's the thing. I thought G2 might come back in the game, but every time, every fight, every timing, it was like a unit, a Furia unit on them, ready to strike back. I applaud the synergy from this team. Look at this play. You feel like G2 is going to be able to make the best of it, but you have the whole team running at them and just making the best out of this one.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is they seem so comfortable and confident team fighting together. As we see IU coming in off the pack, then flashing over the wall to join the rest of his team. I really, really love the way they played with this composition to set up fights.
And whenever we see a team from either Brazil, or we're going to be seeing, of course, GAM later on today, we talk about how talented they are within their own region. We don't expect them to be able to immediately translate that on the international stage. That is happening for them in day one, or at least in game one. And just being able to hear the fans from Brazil, from Furia saying, Dia de Furia, like, this is the day of Furia, like, this is going to be their day, it kind of feels like it, but it's a 5-game series.
Well, yeah.
So they could come back, G2 could be able to, like, basically be ready for game 2 and come back quickly.
They started the tournament in the best way possible. They had the fans behind them because most of the fans were cheering for them during this game. Do we call this first game, I don't want to say luck, but what do we make actually of this first game when it comes to G2 and what Furia is going to be able to do for the rest of the series? Because again, it is fearless. G2 might have international experience, but this was Furia's game.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think it was luck. I think Furia did play this out really, really well.
Yeah.
Going into G2's next game, I think what they're going to want to do is really pay attention to their draft. Again, I thought the Ari was actually good for Caps, but again, get him on something where he can be a difference maker, because I do feel like so much of this G2 team really relies on his playmaking.
Yeah.
And then, again, Furia's approach to this was to really make it volatile early, and I love that from them, so G2 need to be prepared for that.
I agree, and I think when you think about Tatu during the playoffs, his most played pick was his Ninja.
Yep.
When you think about like the best play and pick for Tux, it is the Talia. So they got their most comfortable pick out of the way, so it should be better for G2. And now I'm thinking about like that one haymaker you could throw in game 1. For me, that was the Neela. And so I am more interested in if they can go the long run from the draft perspective to have more things in the tank. That's going to be my question for Furia for the rest of the series.
Is there any advice, you would be think hard right now, any advice you would give your player to keep the momentum going and grab this second game?
I keep playing with confidence. Like that's the big thing to me, right? Is whenever we have some of these mismatches and we're like, okay, you know, this team is going in as an underdog, you need to play with confidence, you need to play their game, and that's exactly what Furia did.
Adrenaline can come in hot, especially on an international stage like this, so like be able to, yes, feed off that confidence, but remind them the good things that they're doing strategically. Right? Good things, don't forget about it. The adrenaline is running too high, so being the sober second thought in the room is a good thing.
Slow and steady. They had this so far in the first game, Furia, with the upset, with the surprise victory against G2 Esports. Let's see if they can keep this one going for game 2. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Vancouver, Canada, here for MSI 2025. We are one game into our first best of 5, and that game did not go the way that 85% of fans expected it to go, Chronicler.
It certainly didn't. And as I highlighted, I think neither of us were ready to believe when the first couple of kills came through, because we still saw the gold lead for G2.
Yeah.
I think there was still this sense of, all right, around the objectives, around the team fight, around the macro on the map, they'll be able to pull it together. That moment never came. And a lot of that was due to the ability of Furia to consistently, across the map, set up these traps. The Aatrox, the Neela, these attempted engages that just weren't quick, weren't, I think, coordinated enough so that the sustain comes through, the reinforcements come in, and the play gets turned.
And even as recently as at the end of Split 1, when the LTA North and South teams had the head-to-head for conference play, one thing that we saw from a lot of the LTA South teams was they could get early advantages, but then when the mid-game came around, they wouldn't be able to convert those into wins. But that was not the case here in game number 1. Furia was playing as a unit. They were punishing G2 when they tried to make any sort of a move, and they honestly ended that game very swiftly and effectively.
Now, I have had my fair share of best of 5s where game 1 looks like a blowout, but remember, I've seen teams then swiftly follow this up with recalibration into a swift freeze. We saw this at the first finals, right? Remember, back then, Haythorpe able to get a very, very big win in that game number 1, and then Home Life tightened it up. Yeah, was able to pull the series back for G2. I do think we need to see that in this game number 2. I think that the downside of being such a heavy favorite in the fan sentiment, many people, me included, were expecting this to be a swift 3-0. If you go down 0-2, the amount of mental resilience needed is tenfold of what would be if it turns out to be a 1-1. You know, you pull back and everything is fine.
Right. Let's go ahead and jump into our second draft here, as it's Jace, Misfortune, and Yasuo banned by G2. Here on blue side, they've elected to go swap sides this time around. On the other side, Twisted Fate, Azir, and Pantheon banned out by Furia. So one thing that's worth pointing out, Varus and Misfortune were both banned out by G2 in round 1 of the previous draft. This time around, since G2's on blue side and they have that first pick, they'll keep the Misfortune banned, but they'll take the Varus for themselves. Furia, in response, they're going to grab the Rise for one of their solo lanes, can be a flex for either one. And Wukong in the jungle, this is a champion that immobile AD carries do not like to deal with.
No, I do love the Yasuo ban. That one should be a no-brainer, right? Given IU's performance as a champion, the Wukong also would have paired really well with that. I'm a little worried about the Maokai. I think that Maokai is a pick that still, especially as you get deeper into Fearless, does have a decent amount of power. I'm worried about it being picked up this early, because I do think that Wukong still will get a ton of room to play.
Okay.
And the Alistar comes through pretty early on here. We'll be able to secure that this time around. And the Poppy didn't have the impact that we were looking for, right? I think we only had a couple of ultimates, and they were mostly used just for CC, so you get the knockup, but you don't actually create a numbers advantage. And you do kind of need to find at least a couple of those to really make sure you get the value out of the pick.
And we do see the Ezreal locked in here for Furia. I like this pick a lot against Maokai because of the fact that if he uses Twisted Advance at the wrong moment, you can use Arcane Shift to take him into a very bad position.
Oh, yeah.
Turn his engage into your counter engage with just a single button press. As we're into the second half of the bans, Tristana banned out by Furia with the Karma removed by G2.
I was kind of thinking about that. Ezreal Karma, obviously, bot lane that goes way back. Alistar, his biggest weakness is his laning phase. Obviously, his level 1's often talked about, but I think outside of that, you're really not expecting too much out of him when it comes to just trying to leverage. So it does also mean that I think that Varus does lose some of what makes it so strong, right? If you pair it with Renata, the laning phase, the 2v2, is so oppressive. It's not quite going to be the case here. As the weight does get taken off the board, something that outranges the Rise and is generally able to punish it quite well. As I like the Rumble ban, I do think Rumble, especially after the performance Gigo had, plus the fact that there's a Wukong in the game, definitely a good call.
Yeah. And also, looking at how this one's going to go, I still need to see some more follow-up engage on the side of Furia. I like to put Bell and Wukong together. I think that this is a great amount of engage for these fights, for Furia to still call their shots and make their plays where they want them, when they want them.
It always feels a little rough to figure out into Alistar, right? The reason why we saw Alistar really rise to prominence again is because he is really good at Terrell. You get to counteract, interrupt a lot of that. There's also angles for you to get rid of the Wukong, keep your backline safe. as the Jax does come out. Gragas is still open. There's an immobile carry on the enemy team as the Corki comes through now. I think in theory the Corki makes sense, right? We've seen this pick be really good when he gets to actually have an oppressive laning phase, when he really gets to punish. But I do think the pick right now hasn't really been that convincing recently as the Cassante comes through here for Gigo.
And there's also no major magic damage for the side of G2. There is splashes of magic damage. Maokai can often go for, like, you know, the red smite into the entries in the tank after that build for some magic damage. Varus does some magic, Jax does some magic, but there's no real big mage threat, like in the presence of the Rise on Furious Comp. So this last pick, Cassante, for Gigo, a character that loves to be able to just say, sure, I'll build a Jax show with nothing but armor, is fantastic, I feel.
And we did, of course, see a ton of Maokai back when I think he was both a little stronger during the double AD carry meta, which this obviously kind of goes back towards. But let's be real, Flowers, game one, the draft wasn't really the issue. Like, obviously, I think playing a dive comp like that into a Nila can always feel a little rough, but that's not really what the game boiled down to. It was just a level of cohesion that was shown by Fury that was miles ahead of what G2 were able to do. Were able to set up a ton of traps. And this is going to have to be a very important. If G2 want to regain control in this series, they need to catch this game. Because if that man right there has anything to say about it, think hard. I mean, I don't have to tell you about this, Flowers.
No, I'm very, very American when it comes to the my love for the NA versus EU rivalry. But we do also have to look at the G2 bottom lane, I think, when you're talking about G2 needing to win this game. Because when we go back and look at the laning phase, or just like the very early mid-game of game number one, it was Hans and LeBron who had that individual advantage in their own lane, right? It was like almost a four-wave lead over IU. That's really impressive in terms of what they were able to build just in what was mostly isolated. So if they can manage to turn that into a win condition, that might be the key.
I'm also willing to bet that Broken Blade isn't going to get himself solo killed this time around. Did take a lot of risks in the last game, which introduced an additional level of volatility. But for me, the biggest contributor, again, and I'm going to keep going back to this, I need to see more cohesion because it felt like no two members of G2 were ever on the same page. Because this wasn't just, you know, often we talk about like mid-jungle, jungle support, but I feel like all of the members just felt like they were on very different pages. And clearly, not going to be able to get away with that.
Looks like we might have a bit of a delay on stage here for some kind of technical issue. Hopefully they'll be able to get that one resolved here as soon as possible, get us into the game. I also think talking about, you know, taking risks for Broken Blade there in the top lane, it's the nature of the champion. The only way Warwick is good is you have to play on the edge, you have to allow him to bait opponents in, use that low light bar to give yourself an opportunity you wouldn't otherwise have. So now that you're playing Jax, it's a much more standard type of character, and you don't have to really skirt the edges as much.
You really don't. Jax will always get good value. It's just a very versatile character. Let's move on to team fights. Do you think that after all the changes that we've had to Cassante, he actually has a very solid matchup early on, right? I think Cassante, in mind of many, is still that tank, that okay lane, but really is about afterwards. I do think you can get way more done. That's some wonderful cosplay there.
That's some powerful cosplay ears and hair there. I like that. I respect that. But yeah, Cassante, I mean, I think for a lot of people, the number one thing that comes to mind when you think Cassante is still the showmaker possible.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is a character that if he gets out of control, is truly all out of control. And that's what we've seen Gigo do in game number one. And we'll see if he can repeat that success here in game number two. Let's check it out as we're on to the rip now. Furia this time from the red side. G2 over on blue, Caps on the Corki taking a look at Keystone, Summoner Spells, all the normal stuff. It's Grasp for both of our top laners for the early trading power. Sometimes you'll see Jax go for something, you know, more like the Conqueror if he thinks the laning phase is just going to be free. But again, going up against the Cassante, especially after game number one, you want to make sure that you're having a solid laning phase. Jojo, once again, going to be running Summoner Spellbook here in the support role.
This time, we do see Hans going for the Comet, which I do think is very warranted. There's not a lot of auto-attacking that you will be able to get to do.
Not against Wukong Rao.
Yeah, or Rise, or Cassante.
Really, any of these characters?
Yeah, I think trying to stay away is the right call. And it also makes sense given his lane partner. I think the Lethality Varus is just way more self-sufficient, right? He can just stay in lane, he can just wait clear, and there are lane partners where Varus can be a real bully. I think in this case you just pick him to try, and he will still have a decent amount of lane power, but it's not really what it's about, as we do see. In they go again, but this time Tom's will be fine.
Yeah.
Laning is down, and I also taking a big hit there early on.
Yep, both early piercing arrows, the one on the way to lane and the one as IU walks up the brush, both connect, so
100% hit rate.
about an extra early health potion of damage there. Feels good for Hans Sama and LeBlanc.
Unfortunately, Alistair isn't the champion.
No, he interrupted the crash down there, so that's honestly about the best level 1 Alistar performance you can get.
Yeah, he doesn't really offer a lot, as we can see, which is why the level 2 was fun.
IU and JoJo caps.
Eventually, Rise obviously in any match reaches the point where he just gets to play waves in seconds, but